After watching this video, you'll be less afraid of dying and more focused on the things that matter most. And at the end, I'll give you a piece of wisdom you can recite to yourself anytime the fear of death overwhelms you. Most people don't fear sleep, but death is another story. The fear of death is universal. It crosses cultures, generations, and belief systems. Research suggests that 3 to 10% of people worry excessively about their own death, a clinical diagnosis called thanatophobia. And a 2017 survey conducted by Chapman University found that 20.3% of Americans are afraid or very afraid of dying. But throughout history, death and the afterlife are exceedingly common themes in art, traditions, literature, and religion. Philosophers have weighed in heavily on the subject, leading one to believe that the fear of death is far more common than these studies suggest, and that rather it is a perpetual unease amongst all humans that spans generations. So how do we find comfort in the uncertainty of death? The Roman poet Lucretius called this the symmetry argument. You don't fear the time before you were born, so why fear the time after you're gone? Mark Twain had his own spin. I do not fear death. I had been dead for billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience. While this perspective is logically sound, it probably doesn't hit hard enough to ease your fears. So let's try a different approach, focusing on the time we have here and now, rather than the time we spend in non-existence. The Stoics, for example, practiced Memento Mori, the reflection on morality. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in Meditations, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This isn't meant to depress you. It's meant to free you. If you accept that death is coming, what excuse do you have to waste time on things that don't matter? Ancient philosophers weren't just familiar with death, they obsessed over it. Socrates, facing execution, told his followers, "To fear death is to think oneself wise when one is not, for it is to think we know what we do not know." In other words, maybe death isn't bad at all. We just assume it is because we fear the unknown. Fast forward a couple of thousand years, and science is weighing in on the conversation. Near-death experience studies suggest that most people report feelings of peace, not terror. In fact, a study from the University of North Carolina found that people facing actual death, like those with terminal illnesses, actually fear it less than the general population. And then there's Steve Jobs, who famously said, "Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent." He understood that death clears the way for new life. It forces us to focus on what really matters. So what is it that really matters? Jim Carrey once said, "The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is." Perhaps that's the real measure of a life well lived. Not how long it lasted, but how much good it left behind. If that doesn't ease your worries either, let's take a quick detour and talk about the samurai. These warriors trained their entire lives through the Bushido Code, focusing on righteousness, loyalty, honor, respect, honesty, courage, and consistency. And with this philosophy, live as if you are already dead. Although this sounds grim, it can be incredibly liberating. If you accept death fully, what is left to fear? You can live fully because you have nothing to lose. Finally, let's take a look back to the distant past, 4,000 years ago, for a lesson from the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest works of literature in the world, about a king who couldn't accept death. Gilgamesh, the mighty ruler of Uruk, was strong, fearless, and victorious in battle. But when his best friend, Enkidu, died, something changed. He was no longer the fearless warrior. He was terrified. If Enkidu, as powerful as he was, could die, then Gilgamesh would die too. Determined to escape death, Gilgamesh set off on a desperate quest to find Utnapishtim, the only man granted eternal life by the gods. After a long and dangerous journey, he finally found him and asked for the secret to immortality. Utnapishtim listened, then told him something unexpected. Why chase eternal life when you have never truly lived? Utnapishtim challenged Gilgamesh to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights to prove his worthiness. But Gilgamesh failed. He was mortal, just like everyone else. Defeated, he returned home, realizing that he would never escape death. But in that realization, he found something greater: appreciation for life itself. This story is thousands of years old, yet it still speaks to us today. Chasing immortality through wealth, fame, or even fear is a losing battle. The only way to defeat death is to live so fully that when it comes, you have no regrets. Now, as promised, here's a piece of wisdom you can recite whenever the fear of death creeps in. Death is not the enemy. Wasted time is. Don't play it safe. Don't stay inside. Don't feel anxious about the future. Don't criticize, don't complain, and over all else, don't fear dying. Instead, get outside, start conversations, offer your help to others, live to help others, implement good habits, explore your surroundings, be active in your faith, open yourself up to experience the full range of emotions that the human experience has to offer. Be the person that your younger self would admire, and when your time comes, you won't be afraid. For death is not the enemy, wasted time is. If this video gave you some value, please consider subscribing as we attempt to resolve some of life's deepest questions, leveraging the timeless wisdom of others to achieve a moral mindset.